All right, so the other week I was hanging out with some friends and we were talking about balancing on one of those stand-up paddle boards, and I just was inclined to say, "Oh yeah, I'm good at balancing." And then later I'm thinking about it and what is good at balancing even mean? I'm saying that talking to my friends because I know how good they are at balancing and I knew that I was better. So yeah, I'm good at balancing. But what if I was talking to someone that's a surfer or someone who would clearly have better balance than I have? Am I still considering myself good at balancing? This pretty much, as usual, led me down a complete rabbit hole of what things affect balance, how can I test my balance, how can I improve it, and pretty much this video is a result of that entire conversation. And so today I'd like you to follow along with me as we talk about balance and how to improve it. So now let's just jump right into the research. Here I've brought up a study titled "The Clinical Evaluation of Patients with Vestibular Dysfunction." Now, a cool thing listed in this study is the figure on the screen I'm showing right here. It shows a triangle of three things that affect what we call balance. And we have your vestibular system, sensation, proprioception, and your vision. Now, further down here, we can see major inputs into this system, and we have proprioception, visual signals, and muscle proprioceptors providing additional input to our vestibular system. And here we look at where vision ties in with oculovestibular reflexes, which are the reflex mechanism occurring in response to eye movements, visual inputs from external environments. Visual inputs are the second major afferents for the balance system. And this is cool to think of about how whenever anyone tells you how to balance better, everyone's always telling you, stare at a fixed point, look at something that's not moving, it'll help you balance. And they're right. By staring at something that's not moving, is entirely stable, it's easier to stabilize yourself. And so we can also expose this system in ourselves by trying to balance while staring at things that are moving, or on a chronically unstable surface such as a boat. And then finally here, we will look at the somatosensory reflexes, which are tendon receptors, sensation from the feet, motor impulses, which contribute to the sensory inputs. And so this is pretty much the surface that you are in contact with, whether it's flat ground, a balance pad, the deck of a boat, it doesn't really matter. This is just the sensations that are being sent back to the balance system from whatever you're on. And so now, with a better understanding of what ties into our balance system, let's look at a way to quantitatively say, am I good at balance or not? And so for that, I chose to use this. This is a free resource of balance tests provided by scienceforsport.com. And I decided to look over at the multiple single leg hop stabilization test. Now, this over here shows what types of things that you need to set up the test and how to set up the test itself. As we look over here closer and at the diagram, what it makes me think of is just a single leg game of hopscotch. You pretty much just hop in chronological order of these numbers while stabilizing on the same leg the entire time for a handful of seconds. And so jumping right into it, here's me setting up the test. I decided just to do it out on my driveway using a measuring tape and some chalk. It's just the easiest thing for me. It's a relatively hard, flat surface that I thought would work best given my circumstances. Right here, we see the dots pop up. All of those are the marks that I'm aiming for while I'm hopping. It's in the same configuration as that hopscotch diagram that I showed earlier. In between of all of these hops, I'm stabilizing for about 5 seconds and doing my best not to twist, fidget, hop around. Right here, we can see the overlay that I put on, the same configuration of the hopscotch style thing that we saw earlier, where each distance of the hop is 45% of my body height. So this does scale based off of how tall you are. Here we can see that I totally missed one of the markers. That's actually a penalty that we'll look at later. You're aiming to completely cover every dot every time with your hops. And so here we can see the landing errors and balance errors, each of which will subtract points from my potential total score and give me my error number, which essentially is my balance score. And I did show a pretty bad jump right there where I had 5 errors on it. I promise most of them were better than that, but it was a good example to show you where the errors can look like. Alright, now moving on, this is a sped up version of my other leg so that we have time to review the reliability of this type of test. And so this diagram here shows us dominant leg error scores matched with non-dominant leg scores. Jumping into the next frame, we can see how non-dominant and dominant leg scores tend to decrease as training hours per week increase, which, with this next slide that we can see, shows that more than 5 hours of training per week is a strong indicator that a participant will have a lower error score. And so with that being said, I have looked at an additional study which goes over different parameters for improving balance in a population. And so here we're starting off with me demonstrating some of these exercises. They're done in basic, moderate, and advanced groups. All of the exercises are pretty much combining a balancing task with a cognitive or motor skill. And so you're working at these 2 different systems at once to increase the challengingness of the task. And I've modified some of these just because they ended up being really simple. You could see the first one starting off was just sitting on a exercise ball trying to juggle a ball back and forth. It was just really simple for me, so what I did to modify it was just remove the feet from the equation, and I tried to do the same tasks while balancing on my knees. And this ended up being pretty difficult. This is a good example of how I'm taking something based in science, but this wasn't specifically said in the study. It wasn't specifically listed, so am I following it to a T? No, but I'm making it more applicable to myself. This doesn't mean that I'm not based in science anymore. I'm just adapting the science to myself as the individual. And this is what I feel a lot of people lose in research studies. They look at the research study and think they have to replicate it exactly. And technically, do they need to be based in science? Like, maybe, but what is a better route is just looking at the principles and trying to match those. This one right here is balancing a ping pong ball while trying to balance with it. It was exceedingly difficult. I really thought I was just going to fly through it, and this one ended up being pretty hard for me. Next up here, I'm pretty much repeating all of the same tasks, just while balancing single leg on a standard foam balancing pad. All of these listed here in the pop-up just really show different ways in how the study is set up to have progression. It just so happens that the furthest progression of this study still wasn't really challenging enough for where I'm currently at. I will say though, by switching out the tennis ball for this light 3-pound med ball that I'm using here, it actually ended up making a pretty significant difference. I didn't really think just a couple pounds would really change the balancing that much, but it actually did influence it quite a bit. You can really see on some of these that I am struggling for knee stabilization. On a few of them, my knee is just shaking in and out nonstop, and it was actually a lot of fun once I started doing the more advanced versions that I was making up for myself. Replicating what was done in the study was pretty boring, and I did not have a good time doing it. But once I started just picking my own cognitive or motor test to match with a harder balance task, it actually ended up being a pretty fun training session. Now, everything that I just showed in those video clips before were pretty much just changing the somatosensory inputs from your lower limbs and the cognitive or motor task. And so what I thought would be fun would be to work on the other end of the triangle that we had looked at earlier in the video. And so I decided to choose a vision task that I think I've seen a couple years ago. It's called a Marsden ball, but we'll jump into it here and you can see how I set it up. And so here I am gathering the supplies for the Marsden ball. I'm just using a couple of things that I had around the house. This isn't by any means a professional setup, but it is a good way to show you that If you see something cool online or you see a fun training idea, you can find ways to modify it and set it up. I've never done this before. I came across it while looking at things for the video, and why not give it a shot then? The idea of the Marsden ball is to have a ball attached to a string that you're following with your vision. I'm just combining this with the balance tasks that we looked at earlier in the video. And so by trying to track a moving object with my eye while balancing, it actually makes the balancing a lot harder. I want you to pay attention, embarrassingly, to my knees during this video because they shake way more than the previous versions that we did before where I was just juggling or simply trying to balance with no other inputs. Now, an important factor in this is you do have to track the ball with your eyes. I opted for stabilizing my head, so not allowing those neck muscles to provide additional sensory input, and instead just tracked it with my vision. Here, you can see really close up that I am not lying. I am trying to track this ball with my eye with every movement, and I made it a little bit harder by covering up one eye at a time. You can kind of get the idea that this is a vision test right once I cover the eye. But by combining it with balance, it actually was pretty effective in increasing the difficulty of the movement for me. Now here I am replicating it again while balancing with my knees on the exercise ball. And at the beginning, I was just hitting the ball and it was kind of going in a straight line forward and back. But in this video right here, you can see I hit it in kind of a circular motion. It was so much harder having the ball going in a circular motion than just in a straight forward and back line with it, and I could not figure it out at all. Now, all of those clips were taken the first time me experimenting with them, and I'm not gonna lie, I did continue to do the Marsden ball ones, balancing on the ball for a while after that recording stopped, and I woke up the next morning incredibly sore in what's probably my internal obliques, I'm guessing. So it was a really fun thing, and I did get a decent workout out of it. So I was pretty happy with the process as a whole. And so now, if I want to use some of these non-specific tasks to improve my balance training, the hop test that we did earlier in the video is the perfect way to test it. I'm not going to track the time of my ability to balance on a ball with my knees while staring at a tennis ball swinging back and forth. That's a little too ridiculous even for me. But what I would like to do is include some of these with other factors in my training and maybe reassess my balance in a month or two. Has it improved the way that I wanted it to? Have I at least maintained where it's at? I don't think it would get worse, but maybe it does. How would I know unless I'm retesting my ability to balance? This was a really fun experiment for me, and I'm definitely going to include some of these balancing tasks and concepts in my training over the next couple of months. Once again, thank you everyone who decided to watch through this video today, and I look forward to putting up another video next week.